The silence inside that courtroom was deafening, until Malaysia Pargo rose from her seat. She didn't scream, she didn't wail, she didn't even look at the cameras that were burning holes into her back. She simply stood, and the room shifted. Her voice trembled when it first escaped her lips, but her eyes carried a fire so sharp it could slice through steel. "I can't stay silent anymore," she said. The words were simple, but the weight behind them made even the judge sit forward. Everyone in that room felt it. The reporters clutching their notepads, the jurors stiff in their seats, the lawyers adjusting their ties, and most of all, Christie, who sat frozen, her hands gripping her lap so tightly her knuckles were white. No one knew what Malaysia was about to reveal, but everyone knew it would burn. She held up a folder that looked ordinary, but the moment the first screenshot lit up on the courtroom screen, it was as if a bomb detonated. Christie's mask slipped in real time. Dozens of texts, flirty messages, midnight confessions spilled across the projector like poison poured into water. And then came the one that ripped the air from everyone's lungs. When the cameras are rolling, I play the part. But when the lights go off, I live my truth. The gallery gasped, some clutching their chests, others shaking their heads in disbelief. This wasn't rumor, this wasn't speculation. This was Doug, in his own words, destroying his own image. Even the judge, a man hardened by decades of scandalous testimonies, leaned back, eyebrows raised. This wasn't mere infidelity, it was fraud of the heart, betrayal of trust so carefully. Orchestrated, it had fooled an entire audience for years. Christie had built an empire on loyalty, on standing beside his wife as if he were immune to the curses of fame and temptation. For years, he was held up as the golden example, the devoted husband, the untouchable partner. And now, in one moment, that empire cracked. Jackie sat in the front row like a statue, her body stiff, her eyes locked on the screen. Her lips trembled as the messages rolled on, and finally, she whispered to no one in particular, "Now I know where he was. Every night I waited and he never came home." Her tears welled up, the kind of tears that sting because they're not born of shock, but of confirmation, of realizing the gut instincts she suppressed were always right. Outside the courthouse, media vans were already pushing out alerts. Headlines flashing, Malaysia Pargo drops bombshell evidence. Christie exposed, Jackie blindsided in live meltdown. The story had broken, but the courtroom was only just beginning to fracture. Malaysia walked to the bench, her heels striking the floor like a drumbeat of war. In her hand was the thick folder, trembling not from fear but from fury. And when she placed it on the evidence table, the judge visibly flinched. "Your Honor," she said, steady now, "I didn't come here to attack him. I came here to show the truth. The truth Jackie couldn't see because he buried her in lies." The first text glowed on the screen. "I only play the loyal husband. When the cameras are rolling. Behind closed doors, I do what I want." The gallery erupted. Shocked murmurs, gasps, phones buzzing under the benches as people tried to capture the moment in words they couldn't fully process. Jackie covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking as her world crumbled in front of strangers and flashing cameras. Doug sat stiff, his face red, sweat forming across his forehead, while his lawyer whispered frantically into his ear, but it was already too late. The truth was out, raw and merciless. Then Malaysia turned. Her voice no longer shook. It cut, sharp and brutal. He made Jackie feel crazy. He told her she was paranoid when all along he was juggling other women in hotel rooms. He told her she was nagging, that she was suffocating, while promising strangers money, love, and fantasies. More receipts rolled across the screen. Texts to women he called by pet names, dates arranged under fake IDs, screenshots of money transfers, promises whispered in secret. "You're not like Jackie. You don't nag me. You don't make me feel trapped." The room was so silent it felt suffocating, as if even breathing was disrespectful to the truth hanging heavy in the air. This wasn't just adultery. It was calculated manipulation, emotional warfare waged against the very woman who had defended him for 30 years. The judge finally spoke, his voice cautious. "Miss Pargo, can you confirm the authenticity of these messages?" Malaysia nodded firmly. "Yes, Your Honor. They were pulled from a backup of Doug's private number. the one he thought no one knew about. The words landed like a gavel before the gavel even struck. Doug looked up for the first time, his face flushed, jaw clenched, his image as the model husband evaporating with every breath. Jackie stood slowly, her voice a whisper of agony. I gave that man 30 years. 30 years of protecting him, believing him, standing beside him, and this was all a lie? Her voice cracked, and then she collapsed back into her seat, sobbing into her hands as her lawyer gently placed a hand on her shoulder. The courtroom didn't move. They didn't breathe. They watched a woman's entire life unravel in real time, broadcasted through texts, receipts, and the betrayal of a man she had built her world around. Malaysia stepped closer to her, her eyes soft but fierce. You weren't crazy. You were targeted. And in that moment, the power shifted. Jackie wasn't just a victim anymore. She was proof. Proof of how lies can strangle truth. Proof of how manipulation can mask itself as love. Proof of how women can lose themselves in the image of a man they thought was solid, only to discover he was made of sand. Jackie's sobs filled the silence. Outside the courthouse, headlines were already trending, social media in chaos. Doug Christie exposed for double life. Malaysia Pargo proves the receipts. Jackie Christie breaks down in court. Inside, however, the war wasn't finished. Because Malaysia had only just begun unloading the arsenal she'd been carrying, the courtroom still hadn't recovered from the first wave when Malaysia Pargo returned to the stand. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the railing, not because she was nervous, but because the rage that had lived inside her for years was finally breaking free. The silence was suffocating, yet beneath it all was a tension so thick the walls themselves seemed to pulse. The judge leaned forward, his brow furrowed while Doug Christie sat rigid, face red, lips pressed tight, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Jackie Christie, her mascara streaked with tears, sat like stone, frozen but broken, her chest rising in sharp bursts. Malaysia cleared her throat. Your Honor, she said, what I've shown you so far is only the surface. She opened. Another folder and a hush swept across the gallery, so absolute that even the sound of her papers rustling echoed. These aren't rumors, these are recordings, voicemails, words spoken in his own voice that confirm everything. The screen flickered and then came Doug's voice, smooth, cocky, unfiltered. You think Jackie knows me? She only knows what I let her see. You see the real me. The room gasped. Some jurors shifted uncomfortably while others fixed their eyes on Doug like they were seeing a stranger. Jackie's face drained of color. Her body trembled as she gripped her coat tighter, hearing her husband's voice betray her in front of the entire world. Doug lowered his head, refusing to look at her. Play the next one, Malaysia instructed, her tone as sharp as a blade. Another recording filled the air. Jackie's obsessed with the perfect couple image. But that's for her, not for me. The real me? She couldn't survive that. That's why I keep her in the dark. Jackie gasped audibly, this time covering her mouth with shaking hands. It was one thing to read the texts, but to hear his voice, cold, unflinching, smug, was shattering in a way words alone could never be. The judge's expression hardened. He adjusted his glasses and looked directly at Doug. Mr. Christie, is this your voice? Doug's lawyer shot up immediately. Objection, Your Honor. These recordings are hearsay. They lack proper verification. But the judge raised his hand. Sit down, counselor. The witness has already provided metadata logs and timestamp verification. Unless you're disputing the authenticity directly, the court will allow it. Doug's lawyer hesitated, his face pale. Doug clenched his jaw, fists balled, but he said nothing. Because silence, in that moment, said more than words ever could. Malaysia's voice steadied as she looked at Jackie, her own eyes glistening. I told her the truth once. She didn't believe me. He made her feel like she was crazy. He told her she was paranoid. He called her jealous. But she wasn't crazy. She was surviving a man who built an empire on deception. Jackie's chest heaved as sobs caught in her throat. Her hands trembled in her lap as the weight of 30 years of lies pressed down on her shoulders. He told me I wasn't the only one, Malaysia continued. He told me he had mastered the art, of living multiple lives. And then he proved it over and over again. Burner phones, fake names, secret hotels, promises of money. He played us all. The next batch of evidence flashed across the screen. Pages of transcripts showing code names and secret rendezvous at a lake house. The words dripped with arrogance. Jackie is a brand, not a wife. She's my shield. But this is my real home. The gallery audibly gasped again. A woman in the back row muttered, "My God." Jackie sat upright now, her eyes locked on Doug, who still refused to look back. Her chest rose and fell in shallow bursts as though every breath threatened to choke her. "Doug," she whispered, voice cracking. "Was I just a brand to you? A paycheck? A cover?" Doug shifted uncomfortably, but his lawyer yanked on his sleeve, whispering furiously for him to remain silent. And then came the journal. Malaysia's lawyer stepped forward with another thick folder. "Your Honor, we have an anonymous testimony verified by independent counsel. This journal belonged to another woman who was in a 4-year relationship with Mr. Christie during his marriage to Jackie." The courtroom broke into a frenzy of murmurs before the judge banged the gavel. "Order!" But even order couldn't calm the storm now. The lawyer opened the folder and read aloud. "Doug told me Jackie doesn't love him like I do. He said he only stays with her for the cameras, for the show, for the brand. He called our lake house the real home. He told me I was the only one, until I found out I wasn't." Jackie's body convulsed, her hand gripping her chest like she couldn't catch her breath. She whispered over and over again, "How did I not know? How did I not see?" Malaysia stepped closer to her, their eyes locking in a silent moment of shared devastation. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was war. Two women, once, pitted against each other by lies, now bound by the truth of a man who manipulated them both. The courtroom sat frozen, witnessing something rawer than any scripted reality show could deliver. Jackie's tears weren't entertainment. They were a life unraveling. Then, like gasoline on fire, another message appeared on the screen. Doug texting another woman. "Jackie suspects. She's been snooping. If she finds out about you, she'll go off the rails. But don't worry, I got her trained." The room erupted. People gasped, some even shouted. Jackie shot up from her seat, her face twisted in rage and heartbreak. "You called me trained?" she screamed across the courtroom. "I gave you my life, Doug, my soul, my loyalty, and you called me trained?" Her voice cracked, raw and unfiltered, echoing through every corner of the courtroom. Doug lowered his head, unable to face her fury. His lawyer tried to object, but the words drowned beneath the storm Jackie unleashed. Outside the courthouse, the media circus was at full throttle. TMZ live-streamed updates. The Shade Room posted side-by-side screenshots of the texts. Memes flooded Twitter, Jackie crying with captions like, "Sis really thought he was different." Clips from old Basketball Wives episodes resurfaced, showing Jackie passionately defending Doug's loyalty, now drenched in painful irony. One viral meme showed Doug at the lake house with the caption, "When you play faithful on TV, but forget the receipts exist." Malaysia's evidence wasn't just destroying him in court. It was dismantling him online, his reputation collapsing in real time. But inside the courtroom, the destruction was even worse. Jackie stood in the center of the room, her body trembling, but her voice strong. Every time I asked him if something felt off, he made me feel insane. He gaslit me. He told me I was paranoid, and I defended him to people who already knew the truth. "You didn't just cheat on me, Doug. You killed the part of me that believed in love." Her words silenced the gallery. Even the judge looked stricken, as if watching history collapse in front of his eyes. Doug's mouth opened. "Jackie, wait!" But the judge snapped sharply. "Mr. Christie, do not speak unless asked to." The authority in his tone shut Doug down instantly, leaving him red-faced and fuming silently. Malaysia sat back, her lawyer whispering in her ear, but her eyes never left Jackie. She knew this wasn't about her anymore. It was about Jackie reclaiming her voice after 30 years of silence. The women weren't rivals anymore. They were survivors. Survivors of a man who built his entire identity on manipulation. Survivors of a husband who turned loyalty into a mask he wore for profit. Survivors of lies dressed as love. And then, when the judge called for a recess, Jackie did something no one expected. She stood before the court, reached into her purse, and pulled out her wedding ring. Her hand shook as she walked to the judge's desk. She placed it gently on the wood, her voice breaking as she said, "I took this vow in front of God and the world. But the man I married took a vow in front of a mirror to serve himself. I'm done pretending. Let this be the last symbol of a lie I carried for far too long." The room went silent, the kind of silence that screams louder than noise. Doug's mouth fell open. "Jackie, please," he whispered. But she didn't turn back. She walked out, her heels clicking against the floor like a drumbeat of finality. Malaysia rose quietly, nodding toward the court before following her out. The gavel struck, but the damage was permanent. Doug sat alone, stripped of every excuse, every mask, every ounce of the good guy image he'd sold for decades. The courthouse resumed after recess, but the atmosphere was no longer the same. The energy had shifted into something heavier, darker, and more final. Doug Christie sat at the defendant's table, his shoulders hunched, his jaw tight, his eyes darting nervously toward the gallery as if searching for a shred of sympathy that no longer existed. The gavel echoed, but it did nothing to reset the mood. Reporters sat with pens trembling against paper. Bloggers whispered furiously into phones, and cameras perched like hawks, ready to immortalize every flicker of Doug's unraveling. Jackie Christie had not returned to her seat, her absence sitting louder than her presence ever could. The space she left behind felt like a ghost haunting Doug, a reminder that she was no longer willing to hold him up. And then the door opened. Again. This time it wasn't Jackie. It was Malaysia's lawyer, carrying another folder thick enough to crush whatever fragments of Doug's reputation still clung to survival. "Your Honor," he said with calm precision, "we have sworn testimony from multiple women who have come forward since the trial began. They were contacted, verified, and corroborated by independent sources. These are not accusations. These are records." Doug's lawyer leapt to his feet. "Objection. This is character assassination." But the judge raised a hand, his patience worn thin. "Counselor, your client's character has already assassinated itself. Sit down." A wave of gasps rolled across the room. Doug clenched his fists beneath the table, his knuckles whitening, but he couldn't speak. He was trapped inside his own silence, gagged by the weight of his own words and the receipts that wouldn't stop coming. Malaysia stood again, her voice, sharp but steady. This man didn't just lie to Jackie, he didn't just cheat. He created an entire system of deceit, a revolving door of women he manipulated, a mask he wore like a uniform while pretending to be the perfect husband. He turned loyalty into a performance, and betrayal into his truth. The judge nodded, slowly, letting the words hang in the air before signaling the lawyer to continue. The folder opened, and a new wave of evidence spilled onto the courtroom screens. Messages from another woman detailing 4 years of secret meetings at the lake house. Her words read aloud, "Doug told me Jackie was just for show. He said he loved her publicly, but lived with me privately. He called me his only one, until I realized I was one of many." Jackie's seat sat empty, but every eye in the courtroom turned to it as though they could feel her spirit breaking all over again. Doug dropped his head into his hands, his mask fully shattered. The courtroom erupted into whispers. This wasn't just betrayal, it was pathological deception. This wasn't just cheating, it was a lifestyle. And then came the final blow. Malaysia's lawyer read another line, this time from a different testimony. A woman described an argument with Doug where he bragged, "Jackie suspects. She's getting too close. If she finds out about you, she'll go off the rails. But don't worry, I got her trained. She knows her place." The room exploded. Gasps, shouts, mutters filled the air. Even the bailiff looked stunned. Doug tried to raise his voice for the first time in hours. "That's taken out of context," he shouted, his voice cracking under the pressure. But the judge pounded the gavel. "Sit down, Mr. Christie. You do not get to rewrite the words you wrote. You do not get to edit the voice notes you recorded. This court deals with truth, not performance." The silence after that was absolute, the kind of silence that suffocates. Doug's face twisted. in anger, but his body sagged in defeat. Outside the courthouse, the chaos had grown into a full media storm. TMZ streamed live as reporters shoved microphones into anyone's face who looked like they might have a connection. The Shade Room was posting real-time breakdowns of the testimony, each clip gaining millions of views within minutes. Twitter threads stretched hundreds of posts long, fans dissecting every word, every screenshot, every voice note. TikTok erupted with reenactments, some creators playing Jackie's heartbreak, others mocking Doug's arrogance. Memes multiplied. By the second, photos of Doug looking hollow in court captioned, "When you play the loyal husband role too well and forget your side hustle leaves receipts." Old clips of Jackie screaming loyalty in Doug's defense on Basketball Wives were spliced with Malaysia's evidence, each edit more brutal than the last. Doug's downfall wasn't just happening in a courtroom. It was happening on every phone, every feed, every timeline across the country. Inside, the final scene unfolded. Malaysia, her face pale but resolute, stepped away from the witness stand. Her job was done, but the storm she unleashed could not be undone. Doug's lawyer tried weakly to object again, but even he knew the fight was lost. The judge leaned back in his chair, his eyes cold. "Mr. Christie, this court cannot erase what has been revealed today. Your words, your actions, your betrayals, they are not just evidence, they are confessions. You built a mask, and today that mask fell. And when a mask falls, the truth is all that's left." Doug didn't look up. He sat hollow, stripped of every defense, his body heavy with the weight of a legacy he had destroyed with his own hands. Then, almost symbolically, Jackie returned. She walked back into the courtroom, not as the woman who once defended him, not as the wife who stood beside him, but as someone transformed by pain into clarity. Her eyes were dry now, not because the tears had stopped, but because they had drained her completely. She didn't look at Doug. She didn't need to. She walked straight to the center of the room, lifted her chin, and said, "The man I married no longer exists, and the brand he built off my loyalty dies today." She turned and walked out again, her heels clicking against the marble floor, with a finality that thundered louder than the gavel ever could. The cameras followed her, flashes exploding as she stepped into the swarm of reporters. But Jackie didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence was power now. Malaysia followed minutes later. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply walked out with her head high, her presence calm, her aura unshakable. When asked by a reporter what this day meant to her, she only said, "No lie survives forever." That one line was enough. It spread online like wildfire, quoted on Instagram posts, tweeted thousands of times, plastered across headlines. Inside, Doug remained behind, his lawyer whispering about appeals, but no one cared anymore. His endorsements had already frozen. VH1 had already begun cutting his face out of promotional reels. A network insider leaked that production was distancing indefinitely. His empire wasn't collapsing, it had already collapsed. That night, Jackie posted a single Instagram story. A black background, white letters. "Silence is peace. Truth is power. I finally have both." Malaysia posted a boomerang of her sipping. Tea on a balcony captioned, "Receipts don't lie. People do. Doug?" He disappeared. No posts, no statements, no sightings. His brand had crumbled. His marriage was gone. His name was trending for all the wrong reasons. Fans debated whether Jackie was finally free or broken, but most agreed she had become the face of strength through betrayal. Malaysia was praised as the storm that ripped the mask off, the friend who refused to let lies live unchecked. And Doug was remembered not as the faithful husband he pretended to be, but as the manipulator who underestimated the power of truth. In the end, there were no winners, only survivors. Jackie survived decades of lies and walked away with her dignity. Malaysia survived manipulation and walked away with her truth. Doug survived too, but stripped, exposed, and remembered not for love, but for deception. And for everyone watching, the lesson rang clear. Masks can fool the world for years, but the truth always leaks. And when it does, it burns everything built on lies to the ground.